What we want is in that room.
They're coming in here, aren't they?
Welcome to Bottle Episodes, a podcast where we discuss very special TV episodes or movies that focus their action on a single primary location. I'm CJ.
I'm Courtney.
And today we will be discussing the 2002 thriller Panic Room, directed by David Fincher, written by David Coop. The bottle of the week is a brownstone on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And this is what this movie is about. A mother and daughter trap themselves in a panic room to hide from burglars, but the burglars want what's in the panic room.
Ooh.
Did you know that Nicole Kidman was originally slated to be in this movie?
I did do a little digging and research, and I found that out after the fact, but I didn't know it going into the movie. And I find it really interesting that I'm trying to picture this movie with Nicole Kidman
I think
as
it would
the
have worked.
lead. I think it would have worked.
It would have resulted in a completely different movie. David Fincher kind of speaks to that. He says that Nicole Kidman was going to bring this she was going to make the role about grace and physicality, very Nicole Kidman. Whereas Jodie Foster had kind of like, this grounded, earthier, I guess, presence. And so Kristen Stewart was cast as a foil to Nicole Kidman. So she was going to be like the tomboy, and there was going to be a lot more conflict between mother and daughter.
Wow.
And when Jodie Foster came in at the last minute, because Nicole Kidman, she suffered some kind of injury, or like an injury that she sustained, I think, on Moulin Rouge was exacerbated by the time she got around to filming Panic Room. So actually they shot some scenes with her. Like, she was in the movie, and actually in the behind the scenes featurette on the DVD, there's that iconic shot where the camera's like twisting as it sort of like stays fixed on her face and she's in the bed. They shot that with Nicole Kidman.
Really?
They did. So she was in it, and then she had to like drop out. So once Jodie Foster swooped in, they sort of rewrote the dynamic so that mother and daughter were more similar to each other.
Interesting. That makes sense. Sense, because I definitely feel like there was some caretaking that definitely happened. Like, you can definitely feel like the fact that Jodie Foster is supposed to be playing a little bit more on the fragile side of things. But I can definitely see that in a Nicole Kidman performance. I can understand that performance a little bit more, as opposed to Jodie Foster, who I definitely feel would be like, all right, where are my brass knuckles? Let's get to work on these dudes in my house. Forget this panic room. Right?
Yeah. She kind of goes to that like Sigourney Weaver place a lot quicker than I think Nicole Kidman would have. Yes. But I like the movie that we got. Yeah. I love the movie that we got, and I love the performance that we got. And I'm kind of jumping all over the place here, but it's all related. I do find some of the characters cartoony and thinly drawn. Jared Leto's character, I cannot stand. Those realtors at the beginning, cannot stand. So there is kind of like this cartoon blockbuster vibe. And I honestly think that mother and daughter were going to be that cartoon, Independence Day, Jurassic Park style of character dynamic until, we had this last minute switch out, and Jodie Foster and Kristen Stewart kind of like played similarly to each other. What I'm getting at is I think it was a happy accident. I think that there was like a nuance and a kind of groundedness that was not intended.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think that casting these two folks who feel very similar, because they feel like a mother and daughter through and through. The whole time I watched it, all I could think was, are we sure they're not related or like distant cousins or something? Because they definitely feel like family when you're watching them on screen. I do want to say that I think that Forest Whitaker actually gives a little bit more of a nuanced performance than I was expecting. And then, of course, Jared Leto is going to Jared Leto. He's got cornrows. He's got an excuse to go big. Like, why wouldn't he, But yeah, I'm really happy with the heart of this film. I'm really happy with, what we get out of the two of them interacting with each other. It definitely feels like Jodie Foster has either tempered down her impulses, in terms of, at one point in time, I was this same kid. I am my daughter's mother for sure. Or possibly that marriage that she was in was so trash that she definitely kind of ended up beating herself down a little bit. And that is where we find her at the start of this piece. And now she is back in a place where she's trying to find herself again. And she finds herself by the end of the film, I feel like. So I know that took us all the way to the end of the movie, all the way through a little bit of a hero's journey there. But I agree with you. I definitely think that was a happy accident that we got out of that casting.
It's a good overview. Good overview we just did. I'm going to spit some fast facts at you.
Tell me.
So, like I mentioned, written by David Cope, who did Jurassic Park, Mission Impossible, Spider-Man. So he's a huge heavy hitter. Huge.
Busy man. Yeah.
The movie was directed by David Fincher, one of my all-time favorite directors. He did Seven, Fight Club, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Mindhunter, among many others. The movie opened March 29th, 2002. Nice. It grossed $30 million opening weekend, stayed at number one for, I believe, 2 weeks, $96.4 million in the US and Canada, and its world gross was $197.1 million. So it did well. And it made back its budget, of course. The budget was $48 million.
Okay.
So yes, this is one of my all-time favorite movies to look at and just immerse yourself in. So aesthetically, I'm like, mwah.
Beautiful.
Every frame of painting, truly. And Fincher is one of those like filmmakers.
Mm-hmm. He is, yes. Yes, absolutely.
For me, and we will tease this out, I think the story is like so thin.
Oh, yeah. 100. Yeah.
Paper thin.
Simple. Yes.
And it's a fine line because I applaud the simplicity, right? This was the easiest summary that I've ever written for these podcast episodes that we do. The plot was even simpler than some of the Friends episodes we've dissected. You know what I mean? Everything happens in like 1 or 2 sentences and that's it. So that's like the spareness. I love the spareness. Absolutely. I'm not saying that they should have made it complicated with, we should have seen Forrest Whitaker at his panic room installation job plotting. I like how bare it is. Yeah. But there are times where I think it is too bare.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like I like that in the simplicity of it, in the bareness of it, in the, perhaps the threadbareness of it, we find clues. It leaves a lot of room for hints to drop, for people to kind of follow along without having to actually tell you anything. You just sort of experience it on screen. This might be controversial. I did get a little bit of perhaps maybe a Home Alone vibe from this movie. Just like a little bit. There was just a moment where I was like, is this Home Alone for grown-ups?
It's hilarious because you're not alone in that. David Fincher said that was a concern during production.
Oh, did he say that?
People would compare the film to Home Alone.
Sorry, David. Whoops. But yeah, no, I definitely had that thought of like, okay, the goal here is just to get inside the house, to get this big pot of money that is somewhere in the house, and surprise, it is inside the panic room. And I was like, okay, well, I feel like now there's room for these larger, broader characters. And we can talk about him either now or later, but Raoul definitely, as much as we were enjoying Jared Leto with his cornrows playing it big, Raoul felt like the most cartoonish. This sort of, malevolent presence that shows up and is just chaos for chaos sake. Even though he's after the money, it seems like he's after more than the money. He wants to sow chaos. He wants to sow pain and hurt in this house. And so it just felt bigger, perhaps, than it needed to be, even though he was cool and calm and collected the whole time he was doing this, except for toward the end when he starts kind of flailing. But at the same time, it was just really interesting that we did not, as the audience, have to be directly told or fed anything. And I think the simplicity lent itself to that. It allowed us to pick up on clues throughout the film. So it was, to your point, it was very much something that was both a pro and a con for this film.
Right. I have more hot thoughts on Raoul. I do. Okay.
I'm excited.
Kind of align with what you were saying, but we can get to that in a sec. I do have some hot behind the scenes tidbits. Someone uploaded the DVD featurettes to YouTube.
Nice. We love, oh God, I miss featurettes.
Oh my God. You would think that in this streaming world, featurettes would not have been left behind. I wouldn't mind if they were even hidden behind a paywall.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I'd be fine with that.
You finish watching all of Search Party, you want more, and it's like, hey, pay HBO $2 to listen to this commentary from the showrunners. I would say hard yes, sign me up.
CJ, I feel like you need to like immediately cut that from this podcast and then just go to HBO and be like, here's my great idea.
Hello. I'm here to save the entire industry. Right. But yes, so total flashback to DVD featurette land. There was this one 50-minute featurette just about the production of Panic Room. And it was my favorite kind of behind the scenes featurette because very minimal flash and editing and music. They just let the raw footage of the behind the scenes camera just run.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So you got to see like David Fincher direct, right?
Mm-hmm.
He has some insane directions. We all know that he has this reputation for being meticulous and demanding, and you get to see it in action, which is very amusing. So like I mentioned, Nicole Kidman was cast, then she was out, then Jodie Foster was in. Then midway through production, Jodie Foster becomes pregnant and they end up having to halt production for like 9 months.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. I think that they were able to still shoot with her pregnant, but they had to bring in a stunt double. So she couldn't do anything physically strenuous. And then they had a couple of outside scenes that I think they took a stab at shooting in that June 2000. And the producers looked at the dailies. They were like, no. Because they did the whole TV sitcom thing where they had to like hide her belly.
Oh no.
They're like, absolutely not. You wait for her to have that baby and then you try again. And that's exactly what they did. So they reshot that scene, which sucks because conceptually I actually do like the way that they shot the scene originally.
Okay.
Despite the fact that they were like hiding her belly. I liked what David Fincher did. We're flashing forward to the end, but this is just an example of his like meticulousness. It ends on that park bench.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
They have both actresses on that park bench, but they have raised it up like 8 feet so that they could get a specific shot of the skyline, the Manhattan skyline. Right.
Wow.
And then they frame it in a really interesting way. And then they do this whole like dolly zoom sort of camera move. It looks really cool. And I don't exactly know why they couldn't replicate it for the reshoot, but they didn't. They kept it a lot simpler. So despite all of the obsessive pre-planning that David Fincher did, he pre-visualized the whole thing with like these animated storyboards. There were just as many monkey wrenches that sort of interrupted this production. So it was kind of like a wash. It didn't seem like total chaos. I don't know that you would call it a troubled production, but it was not a smooth production by any means. No. And in fact, Dwight Yoakam, who plays Raoul, said that it was a little bit, he called it a method experience. Like they all, like cast and crew felt like they were trapped in the panic room in one never-ending night.
Oh my God.
This movie is a production design feat. The production designer is named Arthur Max, and he built the entire 4-story brownstone and the surrounding buildings on a soundstage. So it's all fake. It's like rear window level scope that we're talking here.
That's amazing.
And he had to build it to withstand the weight of the cast and crew and equipment, and also construct movable walls and floors and ceilings to make room for the camera.
But it's so good. Like, it's so good. Like, that feels like a house.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like thin walls on a soundstage. Obviously, it's not, because they had to build it to withstand everything. But it feels, you feel the presence of that house. I mean, we can say what we want to say about, you know, how much that house actually probably costs, but it is still amazing to see it and think this cavernous space for sure is too much for 2 people. And of course it's going to draw in some kind of scary element. You feel that intensity from the design of the production. And I was truly blown away by that house, by that presence. I thought it was like an on location shoot that they had done. I did not realize that they had built that. That's incredible.
And they were able to sort of mishmash all of these details from actual brownstones that they loved. So, you know, the best tile, the best wall is like an Upper West Side greatest hits of architecture, if you will. That property took 110 craftsmen, 15 weeks to build the 4-story set. Construction required over 150 tons of steel and 500,000 linear feet of lumber, and the total cost was $6 million. So an eighth of the budget.
Right.
So basically how much it actually cost.
Right. in 2000, let's be clear. In 2000, it cost $6 million. Oh my goodness gracious. Wow, that is truly a feat. Like I'm happy that they did it because it gets the effect that they want. It feels like, and we can talk about this later, but it feels like a play when you're inside of that space. It feels like you're just interacting with those few folks in that space, and you're so immersed in that world that I guess, I mean, to be honest, now that you say it, I can't really imagine it being done any other way. It would have to be done on a soundstage.
Right.
In order for that to happen.
And doing it on a completely fabricated set, of course, allows for all of those crazy, trippy camera moves. I love how back then, a lot of the reviews got hung up on, is this self-indulgent? Do we need to be swooping the camera through coffee pot handles? And
yes.
I'm like,
yes, we do.
Suddenly we're talking about the necessity of things. It's like, we do, sure. When you play with technology, there's this incessant need to have a justification for it, which I kind of get, but I'm also like, yeah, I think it's okay to say that we want to do this because it's cool.
Yeah.
Which I know sounds like bad filmmaking, but like, let's just be honest. Sure, we can say that it makes things more claustrophobic. And okay, here is a valid reason to do all those swoopy, crazy camera moves. It does really build the suspense in a visceral way, because in these kinds of movies, the suspense totally depends on the geography. Because when the camera swoops down the stairs instead of cutting, then you're sort of timing, you're doing it automatically. You're saying, okay, it takes that long to go up and down these stairs. So when the big chase scene happens, you're like, okay, well, it would take me like 20 seconds to run up those stairs. And you just feel a lot more immersed and engaged. You know, it's like your body is feeling the suspense.
Absolutely. That is a really great point about it being geography that causes that suspense. But also, I mean, we're talking about a story that is about indulgence, right? We're talking about this man that has so much, or had so much, that he had to install in his own home this panic room where he still got to feel in control of everything, that God's eye view, where he can move, he can see through the walls, he can, you know, kind of squirrel his way around in that through that coffee pot handle. Like, it makes sense that we would use these kinds of camera moves in order to display that kind of excess within this home, and also to give us access to that entire space as well.
Right.
So, you know, I feel like, you know, go nuts, have a good time, show us your favorite camera tricks. Don't shy away. Like, get into it.
You make a really good point. I do think it is a movie about power and control, and how both sides sort of cede power and control to the other side. And Fincher sort of implicates us in that. You know, we feel the power and control, right? We feel like we have the God's eye view until we don't.
Right.
Right.
Exactly right.
And the last little nugget I'll share is that the film was shot in sequential order, which rarely, if ever, happens. The only other movie that I can recall where that happened was E.T., which Spielberg did to retain the performances of the children.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Here, you know, they did it just because, well, the set kind of gets destroyed by the end.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
There's no coming back from that sledgehammer.
Right.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Well, you want to go through it?
Let's run right through it.
Let's go through it. Act 1. Jodie Foster plays recently divorced Meg, who moves into a 4-story Upper West Side brownstone or townstone with her daughter Sarah, played by Kristen Stewart. The brownstone comes with a panic room, a concrete enforced shelter to be used in the event of a home invasion. That night, a trio of burglars, including Burnham, played by Forrest Whitaker, Junior, Jared Leto, and Raoul, played by Dwight Yoakam, break into the house. Meg and Sarah lock themselves in the panic room. See how easy that was?
Easy peasy.
And yeah, that's like the first 30 minutes of the movie. Thoughts?
I really was surprised by my reaction to this film. I think this fell into a category of, I never watched this movie because I was too young when it came out. And so as a result, I knew of it. Like I knew that this felt like the beginning of Jodie Foster's, like, she had her brief Taken moment where she decided that she was going to be like an action hero a little bit. And I loved that. I loved that for her. I knew that was like, this was one of the first movies that really kind of showcased that range for her. And I was really taken to come back to Taken. I really enjoyed this film. I really thought that it was an excellent opportunity to just showcase her strength. I mean, that seems like an understatement. She's Jodie Foster. She's going to be amazing in whatever you put her in. But to your point, this movie felt, the premise seemed really thin. They're just in here. We're trying to get the thing that they are literally standing on top of. How are we going to get them out of this space? Because, I mean, let's be real. For me, if I get in that panic room, I'm not leaving. I'm just staying there. Like, that is it. It's over. It was really interesting to see what David Fincher did with it in order to make it more arresting, giving us all of that space that we could see. I loved the scene where not only were we introduced to this property once, and yeah, I'm going to say the property. We were introduced to it once with the scenes with the realtors, but we were also introduced to it again through the eyes of the folks who were coming in to rob the place. And it was really, really, really anxiety producing for me to see that it makes sense that the child would be on the top floor away from the danger. But it also is the furthest room away, it felt like emotionally, from the actual panic room itself, which automatically just sent me in this place of complete tension for the rest of the film. So this film does a really great job setting you inside of those tension moments and letting you just hang there until the moment is resolved. And I don't feel necessarily that you get a moment of relief until the very end of the film. And that exhale is just, it's chilling. that big heave, that big sigh at the end, that final scene with Forrest Whitaker, you're just kind of like, oh my God, oh no. And that is when you feel like you can finally breathe in at the end of the film.
Yeah.
What about you? I know you enjoy this film, but how do you feel about it, revisiting it?
I'm always drawn to the colors of the film. I really love the color scheme, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was like ambers, blacks, browns, like that shock of blue.
Yeah.
Right. Especially like whenever there's fire, like that blue fire, like that's really arresting. I think like the best way to make effective use of color is to have like 3 colors, like just constrain the color palette and like, bravo, there's your style. You did it. Now you have style. I find it interesting that Fincher really wanted to play with darkness in this movie. And I remember reading an interview sometime when it came out. I tried to find it again, but I couldn't, where he said originally his vision for this movie was to have it take place entirely in the dark. Right?
Oh, wow.
Which makes me think of like, this is clearly meant to be a contemporary version of like Wait Until Dark with Audrey Hepburn. Right. Yeah. So he said that he envisioned just like eyeballs floating in black. Right.
Wow.
And then the studio was like, we're not going to do that. Right. No.
We cannot give you money for that. Sorry.
And slight side note, when I saw the opening titles of Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, did you ever see that movie?
Yeah, I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you remember like that it's basically all black? It's like black with like little lines of edge light around like the faces and the keyboard. I laughed because I was like, that's what he wanted to do with Panic Room. He finally scratched that itch.
See, he got to do it.
Everything comes back around eventually. So yeah, so I do love that he's playing with darkness. I love that he's playing with, those camera booms that he loves so much, right?
Yeah.
Not just like this like digital cinematography of, like going through keyholes and such, but the camera moves even when they're slight and small, they feel so exacting. And again, it really heightens these feelings of either losing or gaining power because, the camera itself, this is a little bit of a cliche, but the camera itself feels like a character.
It does.
Right? Sort of like the referee of this chess match from hell that we're watching.
Yeah.
And I am going to harp on the script because oh God, that's like the one thing that I want to tweak about this movie. Yeah, that elevated craft from the direction, from the acting, from the cinematography, it's just met with like this really inane, hearty, hard dialogue.
Yeah.
Which I think was kind of like in fashion at the time. And I will say, I do think that Jared Leto is just miscast. Miscast. I think that he's like trying too hard to be this like sarcastic Chandler Bing type. And I will say this, insofar as personalities can either be in fashion or out of fashion, if you take yourself back to that time, sarcasm was like very much in vogue.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
We were all trying to be Joss Whedon, Buffy, Seinfeld. Everyone was sort of like above it all.
Quippy, banter, sarcasm. Yeah.
And as a culture, we're not really striving to that anymore. I mean, there's some assholes in your life that are. There always will be. But as a culture, we're not really doing that. And so that really stuck out to me. It was like the Nokia phone, Jared Leto's personality. The two things that are most outdated in this whole movie.
Wasn't seeing like Sony's name everywhere. On everything all the time. That's the hot take for me though, with Jared Leto's casting, because I will say this, maybe it's just because I'm not necessarily enamored by Jared Leto that to me it feels appropriate. Like it feels like the same guy who was like, hey, I'm gonna play the Joker and now I'm gonna do all these weird pranks. Like that guy feels the same to me.
Yes.
In this. And maybe I'm letting that influence what I'm experiencing on screen. Yeah, I'm 100% letting that influence what I see on screen. But I don't know. I kind of I felt the whininess of it, but perhaps he was a little bit more in control than that character should have felt. Like there was, I think I understand where you're coming from. He felt a little bit more commanding than perhaps that character required him to be.
He executed the character in a way that was understandable, we'll say. Because what are the facts? He's a smarmy rich kid. Right? He feels like he's due his inheritance. He wants more than his share. So he's just like a bratty rich kid. And that's what we got.
Yeah.
I think that there's a way to do that where you don't really want the character to like die. and that when he gets shot in the face and gets deceased, that you're not like, thank God.
Okay, enough of that. Thank you.
Of you. Because the second that he dies, it's like a much better movie for me. Like
it's like he almost wasn't in it.
Yes. I just like breathed a sigh of relief. You talked about breathing a sigh of relief all the way at the end. I breathed a sigh of relief midway through when I was like, oh my God, thank goodness. Okay, but we are getting a little ahead of ourselves.
Yes, sorry.
So they lock themselves in the panic room.
Yes.
Then, Act 2, Burnham informs Meg and Sarah that what the thieves want is inside the panic room. The thieves try to force them out by pumping gas into the panic room, but that tactic backfires literally when Meg sets the gas on fire, injuring Junior. After several botched attempts to send out distress calls, Meg and Sarah finally get the panic room's phone system to work. A call to the police proves fruitless because they are in a Hollywood thriller. So they call Sarah's father, Stephen, instead, but the thieves cut the phone line before Meg can relay a complete message. Junior gives up on the robbery, and Raoul shoots him dead. Thank God. Stephen arrives and Burnham and Raoul take him hostage. Sarah goes into diabetic shock. She suffers a seizure. Burnham and Raoul trick Meg into thinking it's safe to exit the panic room to retrieve Sarah's medication. When she does so, Burnham and Raoul lock themselves in the panic room with Sarah, but not before Meg manages to throw Sarah's meds into the room just as the door closes, crushing Raoul's hand in the process.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is a good time for me to share my thoughts about Raoul.
Yeah, let's talk about Raoul.
So first, I love the fact, to flash back to Act 1, I love the fact that the burglars were introduced when they break in.
Yes.
I think that's so great.
I
you
loved
could
that,
totally
actually.
imagine a lesser movie, like I mentioned before, cutting to them planning the heist,
yes,
blah, 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 you know,
yes,
while we see Jodie Foster and her daughter like checking out the place. No.
Right.
Okay. We are going to meet them at the break-in. And I think that that is genius. Brilliant move.
Yes.
Likewise, I thought that it was creepy that one of these characters is just like in a mask. Like, who's this motherfucker? Right?
Why is he here? Yeah.
And I love that, you know, you mentioned he's there to sow chaos, right?
Yes.
He felt like one of those like absolute characters, right? Like the Joker, like Javier Bardem's character from No Country for Old Men, right? You're just like, oh, like I got bad vibes, bad,
not
bad
good.
vibes.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the more these people talk to each other, the more he reveals himself.
Yeah.
Talk. And then he removes his mask. It's like some of that mystique is like stripped away. And I thought that was sort of an unfortunate choice.
I agree.
So I hate that Raoul kind of got less creepy as time went on. And then he's reduced to this whimpering mess when he gets his hand smashed in the door.
It felt like Jared Leto got shot in the face so Raoul could take his place and become the new annoying guy. Because to your point, when he showed up and he's just in his mask and he's also there along for the ride, it was so menacing to just be like, who is this guy? Who is he? Why is he here? And it felt like he was going to serve some kind of higher purpose. And I get like being the big boss, final big bad at the end of the movie. Yeah, of course, that makes sense. But I don't know. I expected him to be a little bit more diabolical in terms, or intellectualized in terms of his chess moves that he was making, as opposed to just being so straight up, let's keep the gas going. Like, let's just do evil things for evil's sake. It did not feel like there was an actual purpose to underscore his evil.
I want to talk about two things. Maybe we'll talk about them in tandem. I don't know. One is, well, okay, the umbrella topic is their motivation for breaking in. Okay.
Right.
I was very disappointed when I saw this back in 2002 because all the trailers, all of the commercials, and even the first act of the movie seemed to indicate that there was going to be some kind of big reveal. That I thought that there was going to be some kind of like great irony. Right. Like what they wanted was the daughter, or that this was going to somehow involve either the ex-husband or the ex-husband's new wife. I don't know that making it a soap opera would have been better. So I'm not saying like make it more interpersonal, but I thought that there was going to be a huge reveal. And I was very disappointed when all they want is money. And that's kind of a thing with me in general with movies. When all they want is money, I feel like it's too easy. And especially for a movie like this, I'm like, you're building this up. And if it is just money, then just say it at the top.
And be done.
And be done.
With it. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you on that. Because I definitely was like, oh man, I really want to know what is going to come out of this experience. Like what is the thing that is motivating them beyond what has obviously been set up, that there are a bunch of younger people in the family who are now arguing over this money and all that kind of stuff. I will say, just as a side note, it took me a minute, but then remembering that Jared Leto's character's name was Junior, I was like, oh, he was telling us the whole time that this guy was a member of the family.
Right.
That's brilliant. But at the same time, I was expecting there to be some sort of double twist. Is this like a cousin who has come into the family and is trying to either set things to right or is acting on behalf of the estate, or, you know, something is going on here beyond just Jared Leto hired these guys to help him
Right.
rob the place so he could get some more money. Like
Right.
I'm with you. I thought there was going to be another reveal under all of this.
Like, and oh, that's it.
Give me that
Okay.
heightened,
Right.
give me that new thing. Yeah.
So related to that, the second thing I want to talk about is the motivation for all three of the robbers. We don't
Yeah.
get one.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
and tell me if I missed something. Okay, so Jared Leto, he comes from a wealthy family. He,
right.
he wants his share. I'm not really interested in his motivation. That's
yeah,
fine.
Who cares?
Right?
Whatever. Yeah.
Who else? Raul, he's a bus
Mhm.
driver. There's one mention of him being a bus driver.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, sure. If you're an
Right?
operator of mass transit,
Right.
that's motivation enough for me. Like,
Listen,
you
you've
paid
seen
your
the
dues.
worst. You've seen the worst of humanity.
Right.
Okay. I get it. I understand a little bit
I was
better
like, you know
where
what?
you're coming
Get
from.
Get yours. Why not? Forrest Whitaker, he's Burnham is designed to be the most sympathetic of the three. We don't really get a motivation there, do we? Do you feel like we need one?
I don't necessarily feel like we need one, although I do think that they tried to make it clear that there's something related to a kid in his life. Like he wanted to provide a specific kind of life for his child. And I'm like, okay, great. Like,
There was an implication that he had a kid because I missed it.
Yeah, so Junior in the beginning kind of mentions, hey, don't you feel some kind of way essentially about being in this big house? Wouldn't you like your kid to have something like this?
Okay.
And then I think that kind of echoes through in a lot of his interactions with Kristen Stewart's character, where he's willing to be a caretaker to her,
right,
as a result of, it's very clear he has his own child. He's familiar with, helping kids, even though he doesn't necessarily know how to give her that shot. He knows at least how to talk to her to get her to help him save her life. It was really, really interesting to, see that they sowed that. It was very clear that they were trying to make him, like you said, very sympathetic. Because I will say, when he first appeared on the screen, I was like, oh, please, is this a Forrest Whitaker role, a thankless Forrest Whitaker role, or is this he's secretly the person we're kind of rooting for? And I will say, by the end, I was secretly rooting for him. Like, man, I really wanted him to get away.
Yes.
But
and I want to talk about that. And we're flashing forward a little to Act 3, but we can talk about it now because this is super interesting. Okay. So the ending in the movie. Well, okay, can I just rattle off Act 3 and then we'll be in Act 3?
Oh, yeah, let's rattle off
All right,
Act 3.
here we go. Act 3. Meg pleads with Burnham successfully to give Sarah the medication. Burnham then retrieves what he and his team wanted, $22 million in bearer bonds from a floor safe in the panic room. Burnham and Raul exit the panic room using Sarah as a hostage. Meg leads them into an ambush, attacking Raul with a sledgehammer. Just as Raul is about to kill Meg, Burnham shoots Raul dead. He then attempts to flee, but is captured by the police. Sometime later, Meg and Sarah make plans to move out of the brownstone. The end. The end.
Can you just imagine walking your dog and there's like $1 million in bearer bonds next to your dog where your dog is peeing?
I'd be like, what are these
imagine?
coupons?
Like, what are these big, weird green brochures? What is this? Sorry, that's just a thought I had.
Okay, well, so speaking of that ending, where the bearer bonds are floating in the wind, and Forrest Whitaker, Burnham, thought he was going to get away, but he's apprehended at the last second. That was the ending. The ending that we got. That was screened for test audiences, and test audiences did not love it because they were like you and me. They were like, I feel like he should get away. And in fact,
100%
it had been so long since I saw the movie that when I was watching it this week, I was like, oh, I hope he gets away.
Yeah.
And I was very disappointed. So they couldn't go back and reshoot because it would have been too expensive, right? Because they broke down this 4-story brownstone.
Yeah.
Right? So do you want to know what they did?
What did they do?
They re-edited the ending in order to make him less sympathetic. So I lied. The ending that we saw is not the ending that the focus group saw. The focus group saw an ending where he was somehow more sympathetic. So they try to cut back on it so we wouldn't feel as bad when Burnham gets caught. And obviously it didn't work because both you and I are still like, I think that he should have gotten away. I also think my conspiracy theory helmet is on now. I think that they maybe removed a motivation for him because that was probably getting more into that family stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe his kid had some kind of a condition or like there was some compelling need that he really needed that money. Because I do think that is like a weird detail to leave on the cutting room floor. Right.
Yeah.
So I think the fact that like we never know why is because they're trying to curtail some of that audience sympathy that they've been building up.
They did not work. It did not work at all. Not even a little bit. Because I definitely had this moment of if he comes back. Because my full expectation was when he left, he was gone.
Yes.
And it was going to be up to Jodie Foster to just resolve the problem. Right? That was my understanding of where this movie was headed. But when he came back and he shot old boy in the head, I was like, if he does not get away, this is anti-Black.
Hate crime. This is a hate crime.
This is a hate crime. I do not appreciate. This is racist.
I think, okay, I don't know how they would have been able to do this in a way that felt like succinct and true to the tone of the film, but I could see some kind of like poetic justice sort of ending where he gets away, but he finds out that the bearer bonds are like inauthentic. You know what I mean? So he gets away, but he doesn't get the money. I would have been fine with that ending.
I would have been fine if he didn't come back and then we get the scene of him letting go of the bonds.
Sure.
And they blow away in the wind. That to me, okay, that's an earned ending.
Right.
He didn't come back. He didn't help them. End of discussion. But in this case, like he saved old girl's life. He came back to get the guy. He made it very clear, like in the beginning, that his whole deal was, I want to get into the panic room. I want to get the money and I want to get gone. End of discussion. And so to me, it felt like he had done too much. Like he had almost too much of a journey himself for him to not be rewarded in some way.
Exactly.
It didn't, like, I guess maybe his reward in this film is that he gets to keep his life. Like maybe that's the reward because he's the only one that comes out alive at the end from the Three Thieves.
I mean, in my headcanon, I feel like maybe Meg and Sarah testify at his sentencing. He gave her the medication. You know, he came back. He saved my life. That's the least they can do. Yeah. Right.
Listen, the way they were chilling on that bench, I don't know. Like, it felt a little too relaxed.
Okay.
A little too, we're looking for a new apartment now and it's all behind us. Like,
so that is a perfect segue to the epilogue.
Yeah.
/ what this movie all means. And I have trouble figuring that out. Yeah. When the movie ends, I feel like there's a so what quality to everything, right? Like I'm confused as to whether there was even a character transformation, right? And I feel like we don't even know what these events meant in these characters' lives. It kind of amounts to like a crazy story that happened in their lives. Like, hey, remember that one time our townstone got broken into? That's wild, right? But I have no clear indication. Right. What happened to you over summer break? Like, that's what it feels like. We don't get the sense that mother and daughter are closer than they were before. They seem close already. Right. We don't get the sense that Meg has made peace with either her status as a divorcee, right? Like you made a great point, which was like, she seems fragile because she's on her own now. And then maybe we can surmise that, you know, she found that inner strength and now she's going to be okay, but we're not really given that indication. So like we have to make up these character transformations in our heads, and that annoys me.
Right. It's like the thing we know about her at the start of the film is that she's a divorcee, and then when they walk into that panic room for the first time, she has this onset of claustrophobia. And maybe at the end of this film, she's a little less claustrophobic, I guess. Like that's kind of
maybe
the transformation
right.
I feel. I mean, aside from her, taking a sledgehammer to her $6 million house. But like at the same time, it's just like, okay, what was all of this about
right.
at the end of this film?
I feel like such an easy fix would have been to make Sarah and Meg feel some type of way about home security, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if either of them, we'll say Meg, if Meg is the kind of person who is obsessed with home security and personal safety, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like she carries the mace, she carries the keys in her hands, right? Like she thinks if she follows all of these precautions, if she gets the brownstone with the panic room, then she'll be safe and her daughter will be safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then through the events of the film, she learns that you can never be too safe. And then at the end, she learns to accept that, whatever, right? Or she's someone who is lax about home security, and then she happens to buy this house that has a panic room, blah, 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 and now she learns to be, more vigilant. Either would have been fine, and either could have just been addressed at the top and then never mentioned again.
I do think there is something key, though, in that fun fact that you brought up at the beginning, where Nicole Kidman was the original casting choice and Kristen Stewart was the foil to her. They were at odds with each other. I, in my head, can see the scene on that bench, meaning, they've come together as a result of this situation. I can see that clearly. That makes sense to me. And these two, as a package deal together, can withstand a lot. And now they know that. They will be okay. But it doesn't necessarily work or feel that same way when we've got two sides of the same coin,
Exactly, 1,000%.
Two peas in a pod. They'll be fine. They were going to be fine before. They're going to be fine now.
I think you nailed it. Not only that, but also that I think, related to what we were talking before, that Nicole Kidman was probably going to give much more of a fragile performance.
Yes.
Right? That she would have played into Meg's helplessness so much more than Jodie Foster did. And I think that like David Fincher's obsessive pre-planning, I think, really locked them into certain choices that they could not back out of. They were just forced to live with it.
Yeah. You're like, we are in these circumstances. Let's just do it.
Let's just fucking do it.
We're going to make this movie.
So as a result, I would say that despite three fabulous performances, because I think that Kristen Stewart really, like, she never gets her due. Even now in 2022, people are just pretending like, whatever, Spencer was fine, right? Like, she never gets her due. I think that she's great in this movie. So despite the fact that there's three fabulous performances in it, I would say it's not a very human story. It's not a very character-driven story. I would say that David Cope and David Fincher see the characters as chess pieces and not really people. And that while that's entertaining, it kind of leaves like the aftertaste of mediocrity when the credits roll. But again, a really gorgeous, engaging movie to look at and just experience.
This is 100% a movie my mom and I would go see at a matinee on a Saturday with our snuck in snacks. We would like eat our M&Ms that we purchased next door at the Walgreens, right? Like, this is 100% that kind of movie. Like, it's really good to watch and just enjoy.
And you know what? Sorry, if I may.
Go ahead.
That's really apropos that you put it into those terms of, I would just watch this movie with a loved one and have fun with it with some popcorn, because Fincher has been quoted as saying that he makes movies and films. Right? Like, everyone makes fun of the distinction between like movies and films, and like film is like the pretentious term, but he just leaned right into it. He's like, no, I make both. I make movies and films. And so one could guess which of his oeuvre he considers films. I would say Fight Club.
Yeah.
I would say Seven, probably.
Absolutely Seven.
Right,
yes.
Right. And then movies would be Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and this one, right?
Yeah.
And it was very intentional, because I remember reading an interview where he said that he made this one so that it could just be like popular, right? So they knew what they were doing. When the movie came out, it was a success for him and Foster financially, right? I think that it was like his highest grossing movie to date.
Wow. Okay.
Then in 2002. And
in
then
2000, yeah.
Yeah. And then for her, it was either the highest grossing or like second or third. So mission accomplished is my point.
It did what it needed to do.
It did what it needed. It did what they wanted. However, I will say that while it's a movie, I feel like it's so close to being a film. And that's my frustration with it.
It's
so
that
close.
line. Yeah,
it's that line.
So close.
It skirts that line, and then it's like, never mind.
Like, listen, just get out the popcorn. It'll be okay.
Right. And the last thing I want to talk about is it has many cinematic influences. We mentioned Rear Window.
Yes.
We mentioned Wait Until Dark.
Yes.
And it, in turn, influenced a number of movies, including Flight Plan, which Jodie Foster made 2 years after this one, 2 or 3 years after. It was released in 2005. It was the movie recommended for me on Hulu after I finished watching this movie. I was like, why not? I'll go for the extra credit. So I watched this movie. There were so many choices where the director is like trying to do Fincher stuff.
Oh, no.
I will say Foster's character is a lot more fully fleshed out.
Okay.
Despite there being so many similarities between Panic Room and Flight Plan, Jodie Foster once again plays a woman trapped in a small location, this time a plane, and she's fighting for her daughter. Right?
Of course she is.
But I feel like I understand why she wanted to do a very similar movie. She basically was looking for a redo in some ways, because character-wise, Flight Plan is a much better movie for her. It's just like a more terrible script. Like it's a bad, awful, no good, terrible script.
Oh no. Ringing endorsement.
Yes. So watch it sometime. And then another movie that I would argue Panic Room influenced in a good way, because I enjoyed it, was Don't Breathe in 2016 with Dylan Minnette.
I'm not familiar with this.
Okay. So Dylan Minnette from 13 Reasons Why, he plays one of 3 burglars who attempt to break into a house, but twist, the homeowner is batshit crazy.
Oh.
And ends up like putting them through the longest night. And he's also blind, which I think is interesting.
Oh.
So that gives him the advantage of, trapping them in a dark basement. And like he knows the lay of the land. He knows the chessboard and they don't.
Interesting.
So it's a really, really cool horror movie. And they even have a similar shot, a setting of the chessboard shot, where while that trio of burglars is breaking into the house, we get all of these swoopy shots setting up the house so that you understand the geography. And I was like, that's very
cool.
Panic Room. Final thoughts?
I guess I had this thought of, because I didn't actually realize, like I knew it was the early 2000s that this had come out. I was really curious to, think about the reception of it, considering that, it's a film set in New York, early 2000s. How much of the reception of it was likely, part of that was a response to 9/11. And then the other thought that I had was just in terms of those opening credits where we have all of the buildings rising up out of the concrete jungle. And we've got, this very claustrophobic feeling of the city closing in on an individual. And how that very last scene is them out in a park. So it's a little bit more of a natural setting. I guess I'm thinking just in terms of what is I'm still trying to wrap my brain around what does it all mean.
I know. I think that you are literally like this sounds like a transcript of my inner monologue.
Yeah.
Okay. So a number of things. You asked about initial reception at the time. I think that this got such good reviews because it was right place, right time. I think that we were all feeling some type of way after 9/11, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there was a lot of chatter about personal safety, about urban threat. There was definitely this feeling that like it could all go to hell like at any second, right?
At any moment, yeah.
At the same time, there was all of this good nature around New York in a weird way.
Right.
It's like we're all rooting for it. We're all rooting for New York, right? And so I think that allowed people to really connect a lot of dots about this movie and ascribe to it certain underlying meanings that they might not have if the movie came out in 2008 or 2015.
Yeah.
Right.
And I just, I think that the film is enough of a blank canvas, like you were saying, that people can just see what they want, feel what they want, experience whatever it is that they need to experience, and then leave that theater thinking that, this really connected to me.
Another thing that a lot of reviews talked about was this idea of home surveillance, which is just comical to me, right? Because surveillance plays a huge role in this movie.
Yeah.
Right. All of those cameras planted throughout the house, and Meg's character and Burnham and the burglars, they both use the surveillance to sort of gain the upper hand. But we're not really saying anything about surveillance. And the reason it makes me laugh is because these days everybody and their mother has a Ring doorbell. Okay. So I love how, like, at the time people were like, wow, you're on camera all the time. And this movie really like makes us ruminate on that. And now today it's like,
too much.
So
like, sometimes we just talk to our mailman through the Ring, through the Ring, like no big deal.
And so that's what I keep going back to is if it's not in the characters or related to their transformation, then it's all in our headcanon. Right. And
that's
so like
a good point,
Meg and Sarah Burnham, they don't feel any type of way about panic rooms, surveillance, home security, personal safety, nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Again, as much as I enjoy that the film is not hand feeding us information, I still had a little mild disconnected confusion as to what made her go, totally.
Sure,
let's
why
get
not?
this house with the panic room. Absolutely. Because it very clearly caused her personal distress to stand in that room and to have, the walls closing in on her.
Right.
So it was just really interesting to me that you now bring up this point that I hadn't even thought about. That we don't even talk about like what it actually means that she has this big surveillance system in her house.
Right.
Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, it's like if she felt so uneasy, then why did she make that decision? Right?
Why
was it
did
just
she
to
think
spite
that was
Steven
okay?
because it was an expensive property, or was it to protect Sarah? We don't know. So, how full would Panic Room make your bottle, Courtney?
Oh man, I've been thinking about this a lot because I mean, we are up in that bottle. We do not leave that. We leave it. We enter into it. We stay for so much of the film, and then eventually we leave it. So for that alone, I'm going to give this a B, like a solid B, because they do such a good job. And I know, I get hung up on this. Maybe this is the point at which you take a drink, dear listener, take a drink. The loving attention to detail paid to the bottle is something that I genuinely appreciated. I do think, though, your point about it being a movie and not a film and how close it gets to a film prevents me from getting to A territory. I think I'm going to give it a B. Like I enjoyed it. I had a really good time watching it. Even though now as we're talking through it and we're breaking it down, I have more questions, I think, than answers. But again, if I was at my family reunion and we were searching around for a film to watch on TV and this came on, we would have a great time yelling at the screen. I'm just saying.
I think I feel similar, if not identical to you. We're going to do grades this time, like Entertainment Weekly. Like we're a couple Entertainment Weekly critics. I love it.
Listen,
talk about flashback to 2002. I'm feeling it. I would say I'm torn between B plus and B. I would say B plus, only because yes, there are all of these missed opportunities with the script, but it really is just like based on sheer performance and directorial craft. I mean, like I got to give props. I would say that if it was just like standard television style directing, this would probably get like a B minus from me. But it is because of like that sheer meticulousness of craft that I love. My eyeballs just love drinking it in. We'll say a solid B plus. All right. Well, on that note, This has been Bottle Episodes. If you have an idea for a bottle episode from television history or film history that we should cover, or if you're trapped in a single primary location and need to send a distress call, email podcastbottleepisodes@gmail.com. That's podcastbottleepisodes@gmail.com. Till next time, say goodbye, Courtney.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.